Okay, time is a little bit limited here, so I'm gonna have to do some filtering out. So this is going to be an episode of what am I calling it now? Well, it's interfaith progressive. It's progressive interfaith Christianity, and so I'm going to start out with my theme song here. I'm Mark Collenberg Rega Montero, and I'm going to play you with just the intro from my song Ocean Breeze, Voyages of Many Kinds of Darwin's Beagles. So it's got that nice connection overall. In this case, I'll just get the part of the chorus. And I'm using as my creative name, my artist name, Mark Alma Emerson. So, Ocean Breeze, just a little intro song here. Since, I've got the copyright for this one. Surrounds and fuses and abounds, and the future's coming up so very fast. The present is where you can heal ghosts with the beyond, loving tears, fears, angels, and hopes. You can feel the biggest pond, and you can feel the ocean breeze. Feel the ocean breeze. All right, that's a nice point to break off. So I'll be getting that up, another draft version up on the internet for that song in a little bit. So I've got my Brazilian World Soccer Cup fishing hat there, my my San Francisco Giants baseball cap, and Patagonia visor my brother gave me. So good afternoon to y'all guys. Now I'm Mark Collenberg, Rega Montero. Oh, hey. Oh, he's got, it's a piece of chicken. Pluto Caramello. He's got two names to satisfy Dad and the kids for the names. So, for this episode, so I just want to, start out by sharing the basis of my interfaith Christianity, which comes from Unitarian Universalism. I want to give Unitarian Universalism a bit of credit. Since they had a nice pamphlet that valued spiritual paths, and then also developed principles and sources, which really gave me a nice structure that was the most important thing that I associated with my visits to their services, and sort of the modest involvements that I had in all of that. That always had very limited benefits for me, because I was always more interested in developing in the personal effort and spiritual practice and personal growth that was happening in my other involvements, so that I would value books like Black Elk Speaks, the shamanistic thing there, Kung Fu as part of various activities and practices, Christian Science, a Christian Science related book there. I was just reading that Dave Matthews was a Quaker, or is a Quaker, and was raised a Quaker, so that Quakerism also has been of great interest to me. Al-Anon, representing the 12 step groups for relationships, Coda and Al-Anon in particular, as my focus in that wonderful spiritual program, among other things. I've got a book on Gandhi somewhere, Rudyard Kipling from India, representing something about that. Olaudah Equiano, African account, wonderful stuff as part of that as well. And Setchianos in Tibet. So 7 years in Tibet, translated in Portuguese here. From the film, most people will know it by the film. This is the book, the translation of the book, about a German and Austrian guy in Nazi Germany who was mountain climbing, arrested by the English because of the start of the war and all that. He ended up meeting the Dalai Lama, and apparently, probably, I would assume that he learned something about Buddhism, certainly had that encounter with Buddhism at the very least, with somebody who was very knowledgeable about Buddhism, the Dalai Lama. and to acknowledge and express certainly my gratitude for my interfaith spiritual path before explicitly and formally engaging with Christianity, um, along with my college education and my connection to education, thanks to my dad and his whole context. So wonderful stuff. Now, the conversation I want to then extend as a progressive interfaith Christian with some who has had to innovate. I've used and drawn on my anthropological and educational values, and then a grad degree in international relations, to respond to the anti-theist ideological commentaries that have, in one sense, responded to prominent fundamentalist, conservative, evangelical, Christian, so-called Christian voices, very hypocritical Christian voices in American culture, which then I'm able to recognize as someone well-informed about activism, that they have been funded by profiteering business people, in fact, and that explains their prominence. That's why they are such a prominent voice. But then the ideological anti-theists represent what? Ideological atheism, like Richard Dawkins' kind, that confuses this kind of fundamentalist rise with religion itself and the whole question of God itself, him or herself, and so confuses a lot of issues. And so here we go. This is this guy's Cliff. This is based on "Give Me an Answer" by Cliff Knechtle from Connecticut Church. He's got lots of good videos on YouTube. He's been visiting college campuses in the U.S. for a while, doing a circle of tours and talks and videotaping them. And so it's a great context to discuss these issues. So this one is Cliff number 21. That was as much sort of identification as this video had. And so let's see here. The notes I took, such as they are, I'll be sort of working from this kind of an informal commentary, but let's see what I can do for our edification, to discuss these issues. So there was a guy, he looked like he was kind of Indian descent, from India. And so he was making comments like, so what if, so you have Muhammad, Moses, and Gandhi, if they rejected Jesus? And so I remember one comment in particular, even Cliff, Pastor Cliff, acknowledged, who identifies, by the way, as a liberal from New England, and so, but he's got certainly some insights in his talk, although his theology is still doctrinal. He has sort of made some advances in his own perspective, and makes some is able to make some critical distinctions, critical comments that are interesting from a progressive point of view. That is a modernized point of view that is able to, and I guess I'll make this, besides Unitarian Universalism, as a kind of with having some good qualities that represent the modernization of Jesus's legacy, besides rejecting him as a formal, identifying with Jesus Christ as a formal figure. I'm able to draw the net, or cast the net, of this modernization of Jesus's loving and just integrity for spiritual religious practice, phenomena, and knowledge, wider, based on a university, identifying the university itself as having spiritual religious origins, modern philosophical scholarship, then that included science with empirical methods more generally, to the social sciences and humanities, and social movements, also having, with like George Fox in particular, then Thomas Clarkson being pivotal as in kind of the secularized pioneering campaign, sort of their combination those influences being historically pivotal. And then taking that and extending that to, well, we can talk about Jefferson and democratic civil rights in the U.S. with its various components, but with one major focus being the U.S., and then how that developed in a legacy to F.D. Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, with the social gospels influence, with Washington Gladden there, influence on Franklin himself, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and then his vision, his whole administration's vision and good works in pro-social policy, experimentation, and investigation of profiteering business figures related to the market crash of '29. But then his vision and legacy with peacetime war preparation being one issue as well, and his vision and legacy of UN human rights that has become sustainability and more. So that being the modernizing awareness that becomes transformed with spiritual religious attention, by valuing spiritual religious knowledge. That becomes then a major point of my perspective to clarify that a little bit more. Cliff then was commenting that he was aware that Gandhi had appreciated Jesus, in fact. And I've been using that as a regular reference on myself already, that Gandhi, in fact, was very much interested and very much drawing on Jesus in his work, and for the perspectives that Jesus provides, making him more of an interfaith Christian Hindu plus, as opposed in terms of an empirical assessment, and that makes it an empirical assessment. The question being then, what qualifies somebody? And the preoccupation not being whether he's saved and goes to heaven or not, which is simply generally something that we don't know, but in terms of the value of accomplishments on this earth, which in Jesus' case is about bringing thy will be done, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The emphasis being then on the doing good works, doing good deeds in our lives being the emphasis, not whether or not people get to heaven because they acknowledge Jesus or not. Since our spiritual experiences, our experience of spiritual phenomena, healing, there are actually distinctions, but then the highest accomplishment being represented by our efforts to create decent, a loving and just world, community, and society, being represented by UN values in secular terms, and the way that it values religion as a human right in the first place, and the way that progressive Christianity is not funded directly by profiteering business people as right-wing theology has been, and that has then developed antisocial doctrines and doctrines that value salvation as a personal experience that ignores injustice in the world. So that was a basic issue that guy raised. He also then proposed this kind of scenario. If Muslims had taken over Europe, everybody in America would be going to hell. If everybody was Muslim was the idea. In which case, in his hypothetical scenario, everybody in America, America would have been founded, and everybody would have been Muslim at that point. So that's basically that's sort of a flight of imagination that based on the categorization of people going to hell on that value, on that particular aspect of church doctrines as the standard of integrity, which basically it isn't. So I won't even go into that one anymore. Now, but in responding to that, Cliff talked about the situation in Africa, that white Christians enslaved Africans, and that many Africans are Christian. Now, so the subject of slavery has been one that I've gotten into quite a bit, and so Cliff's sort of blurred a few distinctions there, and we have then the issue that in Africa, Christians didn't enslave Africans in Africa, but we can broaden that particular picture. White Christians, European Christians, that is, Europeans and then European American Christians, had enslaved Africans or bought enslaved Africans and perpetuated their slavery in the Americas or in North America in that particular aspect of a broader slave economy that included Africans themselves, tribal Africans themselves, and Islamic, Arab Islamic people. And so that is the broader picture there. And in the last commentary, I was talking about the issue that there was a very nice example in which a guy from Nigeria actually made a comment that advanced the perspective, with the informed perspective, that Christian missionaries actually got active in Africa before the colonization, the socioeconomic colonization occurred. And so in my last video, I was getting into some of the details that I had turned up about that. So there are important distinctions to be made that really involve valuing spiritual religious phenomenon, practice, experience, and knowledge that I like to sort of ground by focusing on the fact that spiritual religious practice is what founded modern post-monastic university modern scholarship with empirical methods. That whole philosophical scholarship, that whole practice, that whole value that is fundamental to our creating the UN Human Rights and Sustainability World Community is where our focus on Jesus and the meaning, the integrity of Christianity itself needs to be. And now the origins of the structured pluralism of the UN Human Rights World Community that began or had a lot of beginnings with, actually the university culture and its inclusiveness with the Jewish participation of the Jewish, its drawing on eclectic resources, including Islam, and then becoming a resource for Islam after Islam itself had its own golden age of scholarship had ended for very specific reasons. There are a number of issues in context that can be identified there. So then another guy came up who was discussing and mentioning, I believe in humanity. And so Cliff made the response, who do you trust to define good for humanity? And then he made the point about how, defining good is important because the KKK has their own definition of good. So good becomes just a bias from the humanistic point of view without reference to God. Let's see here. I like that point that Cliff makes in that respect. He keeps going back directly to Jesus and encouraging people to study the Gospels. I like to then draw the line from Jesus to a number of things, including especially perhaps the most recent institutional issue, which is that the UN Human Rights and Sustainability World Community and its structured pluralism overall, despite the many issues underlying it. What else can I get to here? True or not, Hindu myths. So then in the continuing discussion, Cliff talks about true or not, Hindu myths, Muhammad for his part, is historical. The Quran, however, has contradictions, and there is evidence for Christ. So Cliff's continued reasoning then involves this church doctrinal perception and this sort of exclusionary kind of point of view that that doesn't get at this historical sociological perspective that is also spiritual religious in nature, that allows us to both recognize the role of Jesus' legacy community, that Jesus' integrity doesn't depend on there's the cat. The dog is my puppy, our puppy is barking at the cat. The legacy community needs to be valued. One thing about Cliff and his fairly traditional doctrine is that he deprecates himself. He has this kind of church doctrinal, kind of fairly conventional, fairly conservative, but I guess it begins with a theological foundation of it, that it considers people as sinners rather than as, and I go to instead, in Jesus' legacy, we can draw on Jesus' legacy and university-based knowledge to draw on biology, to understand ourselves as biological animal creatures. And yes, we do have biological tendencies that is what explains our indulgence, the indulgence that people can do in things like indulging in the abuse of power, the abuse of privilege, and the abuse of pleasure, which can be in various senses. So sin then is a fairly rigid concept and a negative formulation of a human identity. And so whereas the conventional doctrine then tries to gives extreme focus and attention to Jesus and his role, and including some of the things that Jesus said. However, there is a range of things that Jesus said, and the sense of the healing quality in a phrase like Matthew 5, which is, you have a light. We are all lights. Shine your light in front of others with good deeds, so that to honor God. Matthew 5:13, I believe. And then other phrases like Matthew 9, go and learn what this means. God wants mercy, not sacrifice. And I like to focus on the go and learn part. Because ultimately, what does it mean to understand that God is mercy, he wants mercy, not sacrifice? That's not just about going to the Bible, the Old Testament, and its phrasing. In Jesus' legacy, that is becomes like the commandment to love thy neighbor as thyself. The Good Samaritan parable, the prodigal son parable, and the great banquet parable, for example, and the two sons parable in addition, they're full of a wealth of potential. And then Jesus' specific statement in John, these things that I do, you too shall do, and greater. Oh, I mean, I recognize that after coming back to and engaging with Christianity, after getting valuing my education, doing personal job and work and growth, personal growth experience, wonderful stuff that is relates to the basic commandments, the loving commandments, to give them the necessary and appropriate open-ended attention to something like Matthew 5, that it is our light that we can focus on. So sure, yeah, we need to be aware of our sinful potential and our biological tendencies, and then thus the meaning and the necessity of training, which then with understanding of spiritual religious understanding of the importance of spiritual practice, instead of treating ourselves as needing a career and needing to earn money in huge amounts first and foremost, we can understand ourselves as having seeking the kingdom of God first, the kingdom of heaven first, in spiritual practice, and that education itself is a form of spiritual religious practice from its historical origins with Thomas Aquinas at the University of Paris and so on, and the monastic system, and then in the post-Luther with its pivotal figure of Martin Luther, then the direction that went to the founding of the Quakers and other denominations in England, and other efforts, related efforts of all kinds, the founding of U.S. democratic civil rights with Jefferson, that generally has gotten a more technical presentation. Democratic civil rights, he did a technical, political, theoretical kind of thing there. But we can re-sacralize that. We can restore the sacrosanct and the sacred nature of those actions if we understand ourselves as being spiritual religious practitioners and shining our light and doing good deeds in the first place to honor God through educational values and so on. So what else? There's more here, but I'm looking at the time. I want to sort of cancel this, stop this episode for now. So thanks for watching. See you next time. And I got to do some rehearsal here too. All right, and I guess I can finish this episode. But this is based on Cliff number 21. Give me an answer. Cliff Knechtle, pastor from Connecticut. So interesting and stimulating stuff. And I'm your host, Mark Collenberg Regamontero, here at Progressive Interfaith Christianity. See you next time. Take care. God bless and be good. Ciao for now.